is a visionary clinician, medical strategist, and a young entrepreneur, and currently the director at Dharma Diabetes and Metabolic Clinics and head of medical affairs at Beat O, a researcher and principal investigator in various diabetic studies in India, and has published various articles and research papers in various reputed journals like Diabetes, ADA Journal, Endocrine Practice Journal, American Association of Clinical Endocrinology, Indian Diabetes Educator Journal, and many more. An active speaker and medical advisor to various pharmaceutical organizations, a mentor and teaching faculty at various programs at various national and international courses, CMEs, and conferences. An internationally active medical professional and an active member at various national and international medical associations like Research Society of Study of Diabetes in India, and it is called RSSDI, American Association of Clinical Endocrinologists, American College of Physicians. Please welcome Dr. Mudit Sabharwal ji as he's set to speak on recent advances in diabetes care and treatments. Dr. Mudit Sabharwal ji.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a sheer pleasure to be among you all. As we all know, the prevalence of diabetes mellitus in India has been growing extensively and in the world. So, as per the latest International Diabetes Federation stats, 1 in 10 individuals in the world are suffering with diabetes mellitus, and has been known to grow to about more than 700 million individuals by 2045. Our beloved country India is no exception to the fact. In fact, as per IDF, we are home to the second largest number of individuals in the world having diabetes currently. 1 in 18 adults in India are suffering with diabetes, which constitutes about 57% people of those who are undiagnosed. And more than 1 lakh deaths happen because of diabetes and its related complications annually, which constitutes to more than 52,000 crore expenditure annually spent in our country. All this happens in our population, which is relatively earlier to onset to diabetes, higher insulin resistance, and there is greater insulin secretory defect compared to our Western competitors. Now, the burden of diabetes in India is really great, where 4 in 5 people in our country with diabetes remains uncontrolled. This has been proven with various studies, including many, and according to those, about 22% of people with diabetes remain with HbA1c of more than 7%. Now again, as we know, in the recent years, we have seen COVID-19 and diabetes complement each other. The same has been reflected in many journals and many publications recently. One of those journals is the one which was published in Journal of Endocrine Society about prevalence of diabetes and hypertension and their associated risk factors constituting to poor outcomes in COVID-19 patients, where it was clearly seen that persons with diabetes are 50% more likely to have severe COVID infection, nearly twice to end up in ICU admissions, and almost thrice as likely to succumb to the disease. Now, diabetes basically leads to reduction of life expectancies in various ways. There are about four times more chances of more mortality rate due to heart disease and kidney diseases in diabetics versus non-diabetics. There is 9 years reduction of life expectancy in a diabetic patients versus non-diabetics. 3 times more infection rates and their mortality due to the same in diabetics versus non-diabetics. And in a diabetic individual who remains in HbA1c of more than 7.5 loses 100 days every year of his life if the diabetes remains uncontrolled. Now, as I proceed, managing diabetes is and its risk factors basically are quite helpful, and 1% drop of HbA1c can lead to about 10 years reduction in the critical illnesses and death rate. By reducing 37% reduction in all microvascular mortalities, 12% reduction in stroke, 16% reduction in ischemic heart disease, and about 43% reduction in amputation and peripheral vascular diseases. Hence, we can now understand that controlling diabetes is a priority in our country right now and in the future. So I'll proceed towards the recent advances in diabetes treatment and care, which ultimately strengthen our motives to control the syndromes properly. Now, in the past many years, we have been provided various drugs which have been added to our armamentarium to fight the syndrome. From insulin innovation in 1925 to bigonides and sulfonylureas in 1975, and now the recent drugs, including the SGLT2 inhibitors, dual PPAR agonists, and GLP-1 agonists, which have been added to fight the syndrome properly. Now, anti-hyperglycemic drugs for patients with type 2 diabetes are targeted at one or more of the pathophysiological abnormalities of the disease. On this slide, the main site of action are 12 sites where the drugs act individually or in combination to control and which ultimately constitutes the standard of treatment of care which we now provide to our patients. As it's difficult as it's difficult to manage the syndrome with a single agent, particularly metformin in the current scenario. Now, as most of you must be aware, insulin works as a divyastra basically in controlling diabetes in most of the cases. Well, apart from the drugs, oral medicines, there has been some advances in insulin initiation and insulin delivery in the past recent years. Well, starting from basal insulins to including insulins like degludec and glargine U300, co-formulations with combinations of a basal and a bolus insulin, and mealtime newer insulins, which works like ultra short-acting insulins in our patients. Well, the delivery systems constitutes the insulin pumps, continuous glucose monitoring devices, and the newer pens and others. I'll be taking them one by one. Now, if we talk about a bit about their evolution, starting from a longer acting basal insulin, we had NPH, and we had NPH with less duration of action and with more variability issues, which was ultimately replaced by a basal insulin called glargine U100 and insulin detamers to overcome some limitations which we were having with NPH. Currently, we have the newer insulins on our panel, which are much more longer acting, including glargine U300 and insulin degludec, which have been developed with less variability and almost equal to or more than 24 hours of half-life to control the blood glucose in a 24-hour pattern. Now, apart from basal insulins, they were all mealtime insulins, which constitutes the newer aspart, which is ultra short-acting insulin, which ultimately affects the blood glucose in a more quicker way within 15 minutes of having the insulin shot, and reads and controls the post meal glucose for a particular patient. Apart from that, there is also a co-formulation of IDEC aspart with a premix co-formulation of a long-acting insulin degludec and a short-acting insulin aspart as its components. Now, there has been various trials and various trials of giving insulin through various routes in our body, where the injectables basically stand out as the gold standard currently. Apart from that, there has been oral, buccal, and nasal ways, but they have been in trials and in various phases of their trials, and not has touched the market yet. Now, in the future, probably we are looking forward to newer insulin smart pens, insulin pumps, and artificial pancreas, as we call them, bionic pancreas, where a continuous glucose monitoring sensor is attached, and the reading and the trends are received by a CGM reader. Ultimately reflects the blood glucose to an app or a ecosystem on the mobile phone, which directly calculates the insulin dose through an algorithm, and the dose is provided to the patient through an insulin pump through a cannula. Now it's time to change, and currently we are living in an era where we use time and range as our as the module of treatment. So again, time and range, as it suggests, it refers to the maximum time a person's blood glucose remains in the target range. That means usually it is between 70 to 180. So normally a patient should remain at least for 17 hours in a day in his given range, which is about 70% of the time, in order to maintain his blood glucose in normal levels. The higher we go, or the lower we go, the more chances of patient in getting into hypoglycemia, or probably higher blood glucose levels, and low blood glucose levels, ultimately leading to more fluctuations and more glycemic variability. Now, the continuous glucose monitoring systems, or CGMs, have been particularly useful in analyzing glycemia trends, which helping healthcare providers to adjust patient insulin, oral drugs, and even dietary routines, which ultimately helps in controlling the blood glucose levels in a better manner. Now, there has been some, and the newest entry, and relatively newer entry in these have been a flash glucose monitoring system, or FGM, or we call it as ambulatory glucose profile, which is a 14-day CGM. It is basically if we compare both of them, it is basically a smaller in size with absence of stressful alarms, ease of use and data interpretation, lower cost versus a CGM, and there is an absence of user calibration. However, a typical CGM is possible to connect to an insulin pump, which is not there in a flash glucose monitor, and it is more helpful in patients who are having severe hypoglycemia unawareness, or in those probably who doesn't know their blood glucose fall commonly. Now, there has been some studies at our centers with CGM and its effect, and assessing the effect of CGM in management of type 2 diabetes, where we have analyzed the glycemic variabilities in those with or without macrovascular complications. Now, the results have been quite promising with detailed glycemic variability patterns and better glycemic controls when used in our patients accordingly. Now, let's talk about the newest arm in our in the management profile, in the management modules, which is digital diabetes care. We have been dependent on this arm since the COVID pandemic strike. Now, digital diabetes care refers to the use of refers to the use of modern communication technology to collect, assess, transfer, and act upon the health-related issues with an aim to improve quality and efficiency of diabetes care at an individualized and at an individualized level, which and reflecting to a patient-centeredness. Now, an ideal digital diabetology network should be able to integrate all aspects of care, which includes informative, diagnostic, and therapeutic. It provides individualized, accurate, and evidence-based healthcare solutions to achieve improved clinical outcomes. Now, as we move towards an era of AI, the artificial intelligence, it has proven to be a good tool to manage type 2 diabetes in the current day scenario. Now, it basically provides accurate personalized nutrition. It basically helps in various ways by providing accurate personalized nutrition by predicting glycemic responses, accurate diagnosis of complications like diabetic retinopathy, and also helps in predicting optimal lines of treatment based on data collection, which are collected from the electronic health records in our systems. Now, recently there has been various studies on a use of AI in management of type 2 diabetes. One of the study where I was involved as a principal investigator was on an app or an ecosystem where AI-enabled digital diabetes care ecosystem using a smartphone device coupled with real-time feedback was used in management of type 2 diabetes where more than 7,500 people were involved who were given at least one counseling by a health coach. The results were quite promising, and there were reduction in hypoglycemia events in majorly all factors, including fasting, pre-meal, post-meal, and random blood glucose, and there was a HbA1c reduction also. Now, as we move further, there has been studies and trials on potential interventions, including pancreatic and islet cell transplantation. Well, which includes majorly two factors: islet cell transplantation and whole organ transplantation. Well, islet cell transplantation looks promising, but has been used in the US as an experimental project for certain type 1 diabetic patients where donor beta cells are injected into host's portal vein. However, whole organ transplantation was majorly tried for patients with type 1 diabetes having end-stage diabetic nephropathy, but there has been some problems of graft rejection and immunosuppression and was discontinued. Also, there were stem cells transfers where totipotent B cells were used to transfer in type 1 diabetic individuals, but there were some limitations of absence of reliable methods, immunosuppression, or uncontrolled proliferation, and has been there in trials since then. Now, we know diabetes is one of the most challenging health problems. Conventional treatments have been there and have been effective, but there are some limitations. Hence, there is a need of continuous research for new treatment modalities and care for diabetes and its complications. By that, I would like to end my talk. Thank you so much.